Welcome to the first of the Monieson Ideas seminars. This series is based on the Ideas Boston seminar series, which was launched in the northeastern US a few years ago. The design for that series was to promote innovation by bringing together academics with people in the community who were leaders, who were citizens, who were artists, who were basically engaged in activities that interfaced with the academia, with the academic world, but that often did not result in communication and collaboration that would be mutually beneficial. So by bringing together a range of individuals, the goal was to spark creativity and new collaborations. We will have several, there are 8 of these seminars planned. After each of the formal seminars in this space, and it will get quieter as the year proceeds, we will follow the informal discussion with a very targeted, action-oriented discussion in room 444, which is a little quieter, it's a little further away from this, but it is smaller. So those of you who are able to stay for a very action-focused, like, what does this really mean for us? How can we take advantage of the information that's been shared? Please join us upstairs. I have to be brief because the plan is that each of these presenters will have 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, we'll go to the next presenter, and at the end of the 25 or so minutes, we'll have a completely open discussion. And you then get the floor. So I'm going to start by introducing our speakers. Andrew, I believe, has begun to circulate a list of attendees, and prior to the research office at the Monieson Center, please feel free to sign in. Just let us know that you are part of this experience, and we can stay in touch with you, send you slides, etc. as needed after. It's my great pleasure to introduce the following. I'll introduce them in their speaking order. First, Kathy Wood. Many of you know Kathy Wood. She's not an unfamiliar face at Queen's. We've been privileged to have her as part of our community. She is twice a graduate of the university in both economics and environmental science. Kathy is the president and CEO of a highly collaborative organization based in Sydenham, Ontario. It's Natural Capital Resources Inc. The tagline is Imagine, Transform, Sustain. And the whole emphasis of the firm is about working with organizations to make the transformation to a green economy. Kathy owns a rural business and is aware of the challenges of doing business without broadband, and has a lot of experience in rural and regional economic development in Eastern Ontario. Actually, Mark is here, so I should have introduced you first. Sorry, Mark. Mark Henry is co-founder of Fields on West Lake, which provides one of the most unique sites for weddings and memorable special events in Ontario. In the past 5 years, they've had over 60 events. I've been privileged here to see a list of several of them. They seem incredible. They have the capacity and the experience to help create very special memories for individuals using their facilities in a rural area. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. David Fell, and please just raise your hand. David. So it's the Mark in the middle, Kathy, David. David is currently the CEO of the Eastern Ontario Regional Broadband Network, EORN. This public-private partnership is investing over $200 million in Eastern Ontario to extend high-speed broadband access for rural residents. And it's a unique partnership, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, involving 3 levels of government, private sector companies like Bell, and so on. David, prior to joining EORN, spent 7 years as vice president and co-owner of an e-learning software company, Operatal. What I'd like to point out, in addition to your background as an economic developer, is that David is an MBA graduate of Queen's School of Business. Hooray! All right, Hossam. Dr. Hossam Hassanein, a key colleague in the computer science area, someone who I've had the privilege of co-teaching with, and who I respect very greatly, has joined us today. He not only has a background in computing, but of course in electrical and computer engineering. He has taught in Kuwait. He has also taught at the University of Waterloo and has expertise in broadband, in wireless networks, architectures, and in protocol evaluation. He's the founder and director of a telecommunication research center here in Queens. Last but not least is JP, Dr. John Pliniussen. Dr. Pliniussen is an e-marketing innovation and sales expert, a faculty member at Queen's School of Business. He has been quoted repeatedly on internet innovation and sales. He's worked in finance and IT, and of course in sales, and consulted for fast-growing small and medium-sized enterprises. He is a small business internet coach, and there's a list here of clients. Just know that if you want to hear about e-commerce, you want to speak to John Pliniussen. With no further ado, may I invite Mark Henry seamlessly to proceed. Mark, as soon as you're through, and I will give you 3 and 2 and 1 minute warnings. That's how tight we are. We'll just, if you don't mind coming forth, that would be great. We'll just go from one speaker to the next to the next. If you have something burning, you interrupt the speaker, but if you can hold on, that would be preferred. Please. Or just this.
Hi, I'm Mark Henry from Seals and Westlake, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk about what we do with the broadband service that we have. We've been fortunate to have it for a number of years. It's a Bell Simpatico DSL service, and we found the last year that we've increased our traffic significantly by actively uploading a blog after every event that we have. And so we'll upload 10 photos and a bunch of text with that. And it's driven our volume from, we started with about 800 or 900 new hits per month before the blog, and then we maxed out at about 2,500 hits a month. And it has driven clients to contact us by email at the rate of 2 or 3 per day now, which is great. Really, the broadband service makes site maintenance tolerable as uploads and editing are acceptably quick. I'd love to have it faster, but I think there may be some problems with my own hardware that slows things down too a bit. But it's once it's uploaded, it's at Kingston Online Services, so visitors pull our material through the Kingston Online Services server. So my access doesn't have any impact on their access to our site. We do think that competitively fast internet services had a useful role in our success. We are looking to online event and room booking as we develop the accommodation site with 22 rooms over the next year or so. However, again, here our clients will be contacting a server and not us. And, so we'll continue to look for other ways to use broadband and continue to work with Bell Simpatico until we find something faster with service in Canada or close to England. So that's it.
Secondly, I'll give you a bit of history on regional approaches to broadband that are certainly embedded in the economic development imperative of this region. And then thirdly, touch upon some of the regional applications for high-speed internet or broadband services. So, now, figure out how to go. No? Oh, that'll work. Okay, good. So here are the 5 assumptions that I've set out here, and I'm just going to talk about the first one for the moment, because that's the one that effectively has never really been true for Eastern Ontario. So when we talk to decision makers in major urban settings, they're often quite surprised that we don't have ubiquitous internet service across Eastern Ontario. And that really does need to change because I would submit to you that the economic prospects or the economic development prospects for a region like Eastern Ontario, in which the resources, the people, the capital, the facilities are geographically dispersed, is going to be severely constrained until such time as we solve that problem. And I think we're well on the way to doing that, and certainly David's going to talk a bit more about that as well. So a quick history lesson here. From a regional perspective, certainly there were lots of communities that were taking a look at trying to resolve access to broadband on a community-by-community basis. But when it comes to a regional approach to this, I think it was really 2005 with the Opportunity Action Plan that we did back 5 years ago, which really started to raise the profile and the significance of this particular issue. And so I just included a couple of quotations here so you can see that we were really flagging infrastructure as essential infrastructure, basic infrastructure. And it's a strategic choice that we made to try and position broadband as infrastructure as opposed to an ICT tool. And I think the success on that front is seen by the fact that several cabinet ministers in August of 2010 actually used those words to describe the investment that we're making. This is just a highlight from a presentation in those days, and in the circle you'll see that we were touching upon some of the ways in which broadband is so vital to the economy of Eastern Ontario. So I'll let you just take a look at that. We did in 2006, having raised the flag and run the flag up the flagpole, we did the first gap analysis in the region. And so the dark blue areas are the areas which are most poorly served by broadband. And you can see it was a fairly substantial area and quite a patchwork well. So if you ask yourself how businesses or public sector organizations would be able to manage and actually operate their businesses in that kind of region, it's a huge challenge. And something else that probably didn't get much airtime for most of us, but we took notice of because it raised the profile of access to broadband, was the CRTC decision in 2006, which effectively said that the major telcos, the Bells and the Telus, had to start putting some money into this type of service for rural and remote areas. Quite a controversial decision that was made, but from our point of view, it was good because it at least strategically raised the importance of that issue. If we go forward to 2007, when we undertook what was referred to as the Rural Project for Eastern Ontario, it really had three parts to it. One part was a literature review on globally on effective best practices in rural policy. Secondly, a regional data set, which was very, very popular, which we are now updating and revising, and a series of about 50, I think, or 53 recommendations, mostly focused at the provincial level. And again, we were hammering away on the broadband issue, but our strategic choices had changed now because now we're trying to put some focus on the how. And we actually uttered what probably was a heresy at that point with our recommendation that's at the bottom of the screen, which was that we consider turning the responsibility for driving that initiative forward over to a regional group as opposed to having it managed out of either Toronto or Ottawa in different levels of government. And if you know much about EOR, you'll know that we've made some real progress on that front. So. In 2009, as we were working away behind the scenes to secure the funding, we held the Digital Summit here in Kingston for the region to try and put some attention to the applications that we'd actually use. And then, lo and behold, secured $110 million investment decision from federal and provincial governments. And this year we had the Economic Summit, and shortly thereafter, the actual announcement of the start of construction of the network. David's going to talk more about that, I'm sure. So quickly, just touching upon 3 or 4 of the major regional applications that you could imagine this broadband network or any other high-speed services being useful for. I'll very quickly go to this. This is just a map of the transportation systems of Eastern Ontario, and ask you to cast your mind to how you would manage a business where you're trying to secure product, raw materials and resources from a series of other companies or businesses and turn them into a product that you then have to move to your customer. And if you don't have a broadband scale service for that, it's incredibly difficult. How many people in this room watched The National last night? Anybody? Anybody see The National last night? And did you notice the reference to the border crossing issues and the amount of paperwork because of security concerns that is now required? And the note, what the report indicated was that the paperwork now has to be at the border 2 hours ahead of the truck arriving there. So if you're here and you don't have broadband, how are you going to get that paperwork there? Because it's going to take you a couple of hours to get to the border. So there's a really simple example of where just supply chain issues come into play, and all of a sudden broadband becomes absolutely critical. And I pulled this map off the MTO website yesterday. This is where all the construction is going on. So if you're trying to either manage these construction projects or the transportation system, or trying to navigate it, you really need to be able to get a regional picture of this and to be able to access that often from the road, which goes back to one of the assumptions that I was talking about earlier. Security systems will make use of this, especially if you're an organization that has multiple sites, and you need to be able to keep track of that with closed-circuit TV or webcam type services. There are a lot of people doing that now. Service scheduling and fleet management is another area where regional dispersed operations will require broadband. I was at a presentation a couple of weeks ago in Toronto where a company that provides heating, ventilation, air conditioning services is using Salesforce in combination with broadband to actually schedule on the fly the movement of their staff. I think there's 21 service technicians they have in the field, and they're doing that on the fly, but only because they've got broadband. If they couldn't do that, then those messages would simply not get through in time. Remote system management. So I've shown here a map of the 184 feed-in tariff projects that were announced in April of this year by the Ontario Power Authority. They are a mix, certainly, of solar, wind, biomass, and others. But imagine the challenge of trying to remotely monitor the performance of each of your wind turbines if you've got 50 or 60 of them. They're worth a few million bucks each, and you want to know on a moment-by-moment basis how they're performing, how much electricity they're generating, what kind of load the system is being subjected to, and so on. Doing that, performing that service without high-speed internet is going to be very challenging. Now those kinds of systems are built right into the turbines, but you still have to be able to move the data. Telemedicine is another one, so access to specialized services, particularly where you have specialized services. Healthcare services are a very common one. We have something in Ontario called the Ontario Telemedicine Network, through which specialized services, physician services, can be brought here in more rural and remote areas without having to send someone there in each case. But any application that is video or image heavy or dense is going to be very challenging. You don't want to try and do this on dial-up. This is an application which very clearly requires high-speed service to operate. And they also use it for distance indication for, let's say, if there is a group of patients in a particular geographic area where diabetes is a problem, and there's patient education required. And then the last one I'll just touch upon is market development online. And I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but certainly in Eastern Ontario, which has considerable biomass resources and other natural resources, the notion that these folks have come up with in Minneapolis is that they are actually building an online marketplace for that biomass. So in these columns, because it made it a little difficult for you to see, they can post the type of product that is available, the availability and timing of that, if it's immediate or if it's a recurring availability, the distance from the potential purchaser. So when I put this in, registering for this service, I find out how many kilometers away from me the material is, who the seller is, and then some additional details. And then, of course, it's mapped here so you can see it. So there's an online market opportunity that would be very difficult to do on broadband. I don't think any of us would want to tackle that. So I'll pause there. I just wanted to give you a bit of a taste for that, just to underscore the absolute importance of trying to do these things regionally, because having this patchwork quilt approach is not very helpful at all. Thank you.
Well, it's very nice to be back at Queens as a graduate and to know I'm standing up here not being marked by anyone. Ron was one of my professors when I was here. I just graduated in June. And I'm very pleased to now be on the delivery side of all the research and the hard work that Kathy and a number of people have been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. Okay, there we go. So just another broader picture to the context in terms of broadband or regional broadband and government funding for broadband. I attended the Canadian Telecom Summit in April, and there were a number of the Conrad von Finkelstein and the CEOs of many of the large Canadian companies, Rogers, Telus, and Bell. And these are 5 things that I took away from that, really that set part of the context for the project that we're doing. The first one is, I mean, if you go back not more than 40, 50 years, Bell was really a monopoly in Canada. They've evolved to have Bell, Rogers, and Telus, which is kind of oligopoly. If you work with any of them, they pretty much control pricing in the market. Many of you that have complaints about service and things like that, it's very hard to get those to change. There's a massive shift coming, right, with Arasacom coming in and backing up Globe Live. Arasacom is the Egyptian company that put in the over $500 million for the spectrum auction. They're bigger than Bell, Rogers, and Telus combined. Their pricing power in the market by handsets and devices is phenomenal, and that's going to radically change all of the industry in Canada. The second one is proliferation of mobility devices. There's over about 500 different types of devices on the market now, and that's changing the way we think about broadband, whereas historically, 4 or 5 years ago, when they started looking at it, broadband was considered was more of a fixed tool. The infrastructure is in transition, and we're trying to evaluate RFPs to build our infrastructure over the next 4 years. And we know that from the time we start today to the time in 4 years from now, the end user solutions that are going to be out there for that infrastructure are it's not going to be, we don't actually know what it's going to look like in 4 years from now. That's how fast it's changing, and those are just some of the different technologies that are out there. Rapid growth and utilization in the US. The US broadband strategy is 100 meg to the home. That's how they define broadband. Google's doing a pilot with 1 gig to the home for 500,000 Americans because they're trying to drive applications a gig to the home. Our goal is 10 meg, up from 1.5 now. So think of those sizing and scales. And then anyone that said, well, Kathy knows a lot about this in terms of getting funding and convincing the government that it is an infrastructure piece. The regulatory environment is in flux. You see the CRTC making decisions and then cabinet overturning those decisions. And what we've observed is that there's an internal power struggle going on between the CRTC, Industry Canada, Infrastructure Canada. Our funding comes from Infrastructure Canada. Although both industry and infrastructure do fund broadband, they don't recognize the policies or precedents of the other, and so it's very hard to navigate that policy framework and get the funding. The Eastern Ontario Regional Broadband Network, as Kathy was saying, it is a massive area, 50,000 square kilometers, representing about 1.1 million people. It's larger than 190 countries. And this is home to 10 First Nations, so as we do any kind of infrastructure projects, we also have not just an obligation, but an interest in working with those First Nations around broadband issues. Just to give you a sense of in the next couple slides, when I talk about our project and what it's going to look like with our private sector partners, only one company that bid on a public RFP was able to demonstrate that they could generate a profit with 2/3 government subsidy. So if we didn't have the government subsidy, this will never happen. And the company that demonstrated they could make a profit couldn't actually break even until 2017. And that's on about $85 million. So it gives you a sense of the size, but also some of the economic challenges from a business perspective to make this work. A lot of information here. If you have a hard copy, you can take it away. But the quick summary of the project, there are 3 goals that we committed to for the government: access, speed, and price. We actually took those goals and objectives from a lot of the research that the Berkman Center at Harvard did around these. So our commitment on access is currently, as Kathy's research has indicated, about 75% of the people in Eastern Ontario have access to high-speed broadband. Our commitment is to get it to 95% of the population. Speed, currently most people, and I was actually curious to see what kind of speeds you were getting. Most people get about 1.5, maybe up to 3. Our commitment is to get 10 meg to the home. price. This is one that is a bit more vague than I'm sure some of you would like, but near urban prices. So essentially, if you can buy 10 meg in Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, Hamilton, Kingston, you should be able to buy them for the same price in rural Eastern Ontario. And we're just doing some research now to look at what the baseline prices are and what we hope they'll be in 4 years from now. So three key goals: access, speed, and price, and 3 key projects. A backbone project to build high-capacity 10 gig Ethernet backbone, satellite to cover the areas, terrestrial that'll never be reached by the backbone or the wireless solution, and then access building out off the backbone to get it out to that 95% of the population. A couple people referred to the uniqueness of the partnership. This is infrastructure funding. It's one of the few infrastructure projects that is a PPP model that involves all 3 levels of government. So the wardens of Eastern Ontario, there's 13 counties. I think they were particularly visionary when they came together about 4 or 5 years ago. They incorporated, they were doing small, sort of $1 to $10 million broadband projects. In essence, they're competing against each other for economic development dollars, but at the same time, if they pool their resources, they could apply for a lot more money, and that's what they did. And so they were able to get $110 million from the federal government. I think great returns on investment, both for the private sector and for all 3 levels of government. One level leveraging the others. In terms of the goals and objectives, again, there's a lot of information here, but really this is just to highlight some of the different, I think we've covered a lot of the things that Kathy talked about, but these are just some of the different things that we hope to be able to deliver over the next 4 years. And thanks.
So as we were discussing the order, I said that this is the boring part of the presentation. We talk about the technologies, where it's just one boring thing after another. I hope it's not like that. So what do you have here? The first thing is we have already been listening to the application side. The application side from healthcare, telemedicine, from transportation, from tourism, entertainment, education, you name it. So many applications, and I guess Kat was talking extensively about these. But also there are applications like voice over IP, video conferencing, all types of multimedia streaming. All of these applications as well are actually available for those who are in big cities that are very difficult to provide in rural areas where the population is very small and the infrastructure doesn't actually exist, and or is very limited. And if you look at, this is an older picture, but it covers actually the US, and it shows that rural areas have much less broadband penetration than actually bigger cities. And this is natural. Now, if you want to provide a similar type of broadband services, and I'm going to use 10 megabits per second or whatever as a definition, because actually this is something that I wanted to talk about as well. What defines broadband? Is it 5, 10, 20, whatever megabits per second? And I understand the issue about the US and the Google project about 1 gigabit per second to the home probably is going to be a very limited project. But this is also very difficult unless you actually extend fiber to the actual homes. So what are the technologies there? If we have rural areas, we don't have lots of infrastructure, what can we do? So one of the very first things we can do, we can use satellite. And in some areas, okay, this was done. Another is to say, okay, we can use DSL. Many actually service providers use DSL, and it's one of the most common techniques up to now. Or we can use fiber to the home, and this is really expensive. So another is power line communication. So of course, most rural areas we have electricity, so we have power lines. So can we use broadband over power line? This is something else that is an option. And there's a multiplicity of wireless options as well. If we have no wired infrastructure, do we want to dig and extend these to the homes or to the smaller cities, or we want to use one of these wireless options, or we can maybe combine some of these wireless options as well, like Wi-Fi, WiMAX, and the emerging LTE. Okay. So I'm going to speak about the status quo in terms of coverage, which is usually DSL. So for DSL, unless you actually have, close to the to the subscriber station or to the switching office, it's very difficult to provide DSL to the home. There's only a few miles that you can do it within, and after that it doesn't work. You have to find other options. In many places, even in Kingston here, DSL is not an option. If you live a little bit north of the 401, you can get DSL and probably get broadband through a WiMAX provider. So it's actually a little bit unpractical if you don't have the infrastructure ready. Now, the other option is, why not use broadband over power line? This has become an issue now, especially with the emergence of the smart grid. We all hear about the smart grid and the exchange of energy that's going to take place between consumers and municipalities and the utilities and stuff like that, and all these projects, and lots of control information in the exchange. The same thing also applies to if you have data. So if you use actually power lines which actually exist, you can actually transmit 10, 20, even 100 megabits per second over these power lines. The problem with that is interference. First, if you use high voltage power lines, there's high interference, and the option is to use maybe a medium voltage power lines and poor power line communication. And if you use power line communication, it doesn't work by itself, because from the homes, in many cases, you may use a wireless type of interface, whether it is Wi-Fi or through a wireless mesh network or whatever. And I'll come to mesh networks in a minute. So these are the wired solutions. On the wireless type of solution, we have wireless mesh networks. And actually, Nortel, when they were still in business, were very big on this. They were developing actually mesh networks, and they wanted to extend. Actually, we almost had a project with Nortel before it collapsed about providing a mesh network solution that actually can have quality of service provisions as well, in terms of video and voice and things like that. So in a mesh network, it's very easy because you can just hang the routers on a tree or on maybe a light pole or whatever, and you don't actually need actual internet access or internet cable for every mesh router. You can only have them selectively, and the choice can be made to optimize certain performance. That's not fair. Okay, so because we have been talking about this. Coming to mesh networks again, is that this is an option. However, mesh networks don't have extended coverage. We cannot rely on mesh networks by themselves to reach rural areas. We can provide connectivity within a rural area using mesh networks, but we cannot reach that to them. And one project that actually was initiated by Microsoft a few years back and actually implemented in some of third world countries like India and others is something called Microsoft Mesh, where a number of devices actually act as routers, and they have connectivity, and in some villages this can work as well. And this was a successful project in that sense. There's lots of things to be said about this. This will not really provide broadband to the rural area, but rather within the rural area. So how to reach there? Now, if you don't have an infrastructure, the first option is there, which is WiMAX. So WiMAX, usually when people say if we want to have wireless coverage, do we use WiMAX or we use 3G or cellular? And the obvious answer is if you have a green field, use WiMAX. If you have already an infrastructure, then use 3G. So if we have a green field, and this is the case for rural areas, then WiMAX is an option in this case. So what is going for WiMAX, we can have wide coverage, maybe 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers with a single base station. We can have internet access. WiMAX has an IP core, which means that it uses the IP protocol, I guess, at the access and within the core of the network, which is very good. So WiMAX has things going for it. What is not going for WiMAX is that it has been focused on businesses as opposed to use it for homes and rural areas. Sort of expensive if you don't have a large number of users, but it can provide high data rates. WiMAX also have the option of providing relay stations, which means that if you have one WiMAX base station and you can have a number of relay stations, you can cover a large area. So you can extend the coverage of a WiMAX base station, or you can increase the rate using these relay stations. So this is something else going for them. So what is the next step? I still have 1 minute. Okay. The next step is 4G. So we all hear about 4G, fourth generation wireless, and long-term evolution. So long-term evolution promises a higher rate than 3G by much, higher rate than WiMAX. So this higher rate now goes maybe 20 to 150 megabits per second, and people are looking higher than that. So, and it also has provisions for this relay stations as well. So you can have a few LTE-based stations, and you can have connectivity. One more thing about LTE is that it uses a wide range of spectrum. And one of these ranges is something called the dividend band, which is very appealing in rural areas as well. One should seriously consider LTE. LTE can also work with DSL. So if you have LTE and you have DSL, you can complement each other using this FIM-to-cell concept. So the FIM-to-cell concept, you are using LTE, your LTE device, but within a FIM-to-cell inside your home or inside your business, and then you connect through DSL to the core of the network. Or you can also operate with 3G or with WiMAX or whatever. So it's sort of very good with that. The problem is Canada will not have LTE service before 2013 or 2012 at the earliest. It already exists in 1 or 2 countries only now at the LTE. But once it is there, it will be a different option. And I will stop here.
Thank you so much.
One of the things I do is I work with businesses who don't have an urban presence to try to get them more customers and make more money. That's the challenge. One of the first things you do is you look at the yellow pages to see if first they're in the yellow pages they are, and to see if they have a web presence, which is most of them don't. So that's a clue. That's worrisome, because I'm less interested in the technology aspect. More concerned about the money that's being wasted, the opportunities that are being wasted because people don't know what to do with their internet presence. So the next few slides I'll simply put some facts up that demonstrates exactly what everyone has been saying is if you're not on the internet, if you're taking it seriously and investing in it as a serious component of your budgets, if you're not state-of-the-art, or what we're called state-of-the-art. And no matter what you look at, the surprising thing to think about when I talk to a lot of business owners is to have them project about 5 or 10 years out. think about the fact that half the world is now under the age of 30, and many of them don't know the world without the internet. You know, when you look at any charts and projections, that means your clients in the future will have a natural facility for using mobile applications. And that's just how they shop, that's how they look, that's how they explore, and you have to be there. The iPad is a terrific example. It reached 1 million applications, sales in the quickest time in history, 28 days for 1 million of them to be sold. And the prediction is the next app by RIM will be just a little bit longer than that. So what does this all mean? Well, this chart points out that for the first time in history, social apps exceed email apps. Now, I don't know how many times you check your emails in a day. How many times? Three times a day? 4 times a day? First thing in the morning? Anyone do it when they're in the washroom? Just me? My wife tells me not to do it so often. Anyway, the point is that we are using, the customers of these businesses are using the internet in all sorts of very interesting ways. You have to understand that people like to connect. They don't want to connect like this fish. People like to stay in touch. We speculate on why that is. That's just how it is. And the younger you are, the more you want to stay in touch, which means you have to have that facility connect to that on your website. So let me show you some examples of businesses, a business that I love to hate. And as I go through this, I'll try to remind you of my favorite lunch food, which is KFC. That's not what the KFC stands for. So K stands for knowing what you want, find some benchmark sites, and get some help. So that's the K. So where the hell is Kilborns? You know where Kilborns is?
Yep.
Yeah. Try to find it. Impossible to find it. You cannot find Kilborns on Google. Like if you type in Kilborns, you won't even find the right Kilborns unless you type in Kilborns on the video. The reason I know this is my daughter, her birthday came up, she said, I want some sexy boots. Okay. So I've been to Kilborns and they have sexy boots. So I went on there and tried to find Kilborns. So I typed in shoes from Westport. No, it wasn't there. Then I tried to find women's clothing in Westport. No, it wasn't there. So I had to go next door to my neighbor. What's that place called? It's Kilborn. Well, where is Kilborn? Well, it's not really in Westport. It's on Reno somewhere. So I typed in Kilborn in Reno, and bang, I got it. And they broke the cardinal rule. The first rule of the internet is you never have a website like this. This is the world's first website. This is a much better website. The simple reason is that this one makes you fall asleep. This one shows you've got some customers who understand the number one rule, which is we connect with people and we want to see your eyes. This is the number 2 rule, the thing you never do. Don't have pages and say, well, there's nothing here. I mean, short. Because it simply means, 1, it's not a priority. 2, you're forgetful. 3, you don't have any money. 4, you're really not interested in people who are on the internet. And this is what you should have instead. Have some content, have some people. So the K was to know what you want, get some help in getting that, find some benchmarks. The F is once you have your internet, start doing analytics. If you don't know how to do analytics, you can get students to show you, Google Analytics, just start tracking and have someone tell you what it means. What we find with business owners, they find this a little bit daunting. And there is a rule, it's called the Rule of 12, or 1 business cycle. 12 months, 1 business cycle. It takes you about a year to get the hang of this, but you have to make that investment. It's like learning how to drive, it's like learning how to date, it's like learning how to take care of your first child. It takes about a year to get the hang of it. The C, the K, is knowing. The F is finding. The C is change what you're doing until you get what you want. And I've been working with some students who have just started this website called G-Shift Labs. It turns out G-Shift Labs is probably the number 1 business now in Canada for search engine optimization. It probably costs you about $400 a month to have them optimize your website. In other words, if Kilborns had hired this group of young people to manage their search engine optimization, if I typed in Kilborns or shoes in Westport, they would show up on the first page. But most people can't do this themselves. They don't know how to optimize their website. So in other words, it's one thing to have access to the internet, it's something else to say I want my business on the website. It's something entirely different to have someone find you on the website. And it'll cost you between $400 and $600 a month for that to happen. So the takeaway is having a virtual presence, in my opinion, is probably more important than actually having a store. As your store closes, this doesn't. This doesn't. And if you're really serious about it, no matter where you live, about going online, you have to be patient and take baby steps. This will take you some time to get really good at it. So it takes the patience and some money. It's an investment. It does require financial commitment, but it's an investment in your business. And probably the best advice I give people is you can use, we have a service here called Queen's Business Consulting. It's $10 an hour. You get excellent help with our top students. Or you can call people like you see in this room, and they can certainly put you in the right direction. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Now it's your turn. I leave the slide up, but the bottom line is that you can address questions to any of our panelists, and we encourage you simply to raise your hand and start speaking. So thank you.
Just want to know for the broadband rollout, how do you see the take-up happening in rural, very rural areas where they've only had dial-up forever? Do you have a master plan for that?
We'll start it today with this seminar.
Yeah.
Our commitment to the government is to build the infrastructure and make sure that the access is available. There's a whole other layer that has to sit on top of that for communications, and many of the other presentations, getting out to the communities to talk about business strategy, to talk about utilization, to talk about how to use the infrastructure that we're building. We'll support our private sector partners in the rollout and the communications around pricing. Our commitment is specifically to the infrastructure. So we're already talking to the Monieson Center and others about how do we measure and assess the impact of that infrastructure on economic development, and how do we take that information, get it out there. There's some people that either don't have any internet access or maybe have like dial-up or something. 10 meg, they're not going to want 10 meg. They'll be happy with 1.5 or 5, 3 or 5. So we definitely develop partnerships to get a communication strategy together.
If I can comment, David, we potentially would have another whole group of stakeholders who would be involved in that particular process, being internet service providers that are already out there. I think there's about 50 or 60 of them across Eastern Ontario. So I'm thinking it might be them as much as you, or you, that would actually take the lead on that. But up to this point in time, they haven't had the backbone to work with. If that's in place, then I would think they would be much more interested in trying to market that service to people in their area.
Certainly, private sector partners will have a big role in communicating that.
All right, it's one thing to roll out internet broadband. It's another thing to maintain it, and it's another thing to upgrade it. So, are there plans afoot for the maintenance and the upgrade?
Yes, so these are all competitively tendered contracts, both on the backbone satellite and on the access. We're just going to tender now, and a huge component of it took us over 8 months to negotiate the contracts with the government on the one side and almost longer with the private sector on the other. And one of those things is trying to figure out the long-term sustainability. So the government funding ends in 4 years, and the infrastructure has to be built within those 4 years. But our contracts have, the first stage of the contract is really 7 years, and then 7 years beyond that. There's a 14-year commitment on pricing, open access, risk mitigation, upgrade. On the backbone, for example, we tendered for a 1 gig scalable to 10 gig backbone based on all the assessment that Kathy and our engineers have done over the last 4 or 5 years. And the vendor that we chose is coming out with 10 gig out of the gate at 160 pops around Eastern Ontario, scalable to 100. And within that scalability, we have contractual obligations that as performance and capacity and demands increase, they have to scale it up, otherwise there's penalties.
I can add on or follow on that. Sure. If we kind of look 5-10 years into the future, and you look at what's happened, let's say just within the Kingston region, you're going from maybe a megabit, if that's, maybe a megabit per second or something, and we're now demanding more and more and more. So as you start looking at the size of these pipes going from up to various locations, have you projected what the demand will be in 10 years?
If I said we've done it scientifically, like I said, in the States they're looking at a gig to the home, right? So it's all guesswork and analysis. We've tried to factor in significant scalability, like 100 gig on the backbone, looking out 14 years by the end of that project, and considering the amount of fiber that's going in and the technology that's going in, the life cycle of the electronics that's going in, all of those kind of things. I think we've done the best that we can. Talk to economists or engineers that try to predict the future of technology. There's a lot of guesswork in it, but I think we've certainly made an effort to